Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive, and this one is going to be a little interesting.
Yeah, this one is for sure.
We are talking about a question that really got people talking over on Reddit.
Yeah, a very spicy question.
Do women take financial advantage of men?
Ooh, that's a big one.
Yeah, and, we are not here to take sides, obviously, but
No, no, no.
this is a question that came up on the AskMenAdvice subreddit. So, this is men going to other men to get advice and
Right, a male-centric space.
right. And so this question popped up, and there are tons of responses.
Hundreds of comments.
Yeah, and a lot of different opinions and stories. So
Really ran the gamut.
yeah, so we're going to kind of go through that and see what people had to say.
Unpack it.
Yeah, and I'm going to preface this with, we are not taking sides.
No.
We're just reading what people had to say and kind of giving you a broad overview of
The landscape of opinions
Yeah.
on this very sensitive topic.
yes, very sensitive, very nuanced, very,
Multifaceted.
yes, all the things.
Yeah.
So let's jump into it.
Let's dive in.
Okay, so the original poster, kind of an interesting background. He said that the women in his family were the breadwinners.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So his grandma and his mom, they were both very financially successful and independent.
So not the stereotypical situation that maybe some people assume when they hear this question?
Right, and that's why he's asking. He's like, is this a common thing? Is this something that happens often? Or was my family kind of an anomaly?
Right, he's looking for that outside perspective
Yeah.
to see where he fits in.
Yeah, exactly. And then he goes on to ask, what are some signs that a woman won't do this?
Okay, so he's looking for red flags, but also green flags.
Yeah, like, how do I know that this is a good situation to be in?
Right, how to vet for that.
Yes, exactly.
Enough a dynamic.
Okay, so jumping into the responses.
Yeah, let's hear what people had to say.
The first one that I thought was really interesting was this guy who was talking about alimony.
Okay, alimony is always a hot topic.
Yes, and he was talking about how his wife was making like $400,000 a year.
Wow.
And then they got divorced and she quit her job.
Oh, so strategically timed, perhaps.
Yeah, and so he ended up having to pay her a ton of alimony.
Even though she had the earning potential.
Yes, and this brought up a lot of conversation about whether or not the court system is fair.
Right, because a lot of people feel that the courts often favor the woman in these situations.
Yes, and they were saying, should infidelity play a role in this?
Does context matter?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, should it just be based off of what your W-2 says, or should they look at the whole picture?
Right, should they consider all the nuances?
Yeah, and then someone brought up this term, hobosexual.
Homosexual.
I had never heard it before either, but apparently
It's like the flip side of what we're talking about.
yeah, it's a man who mooches off of a woman.
So a man who's financially dependent on a woman.
Yeah, so basically saying it can go both ways.
Right. It's not just a one-way street.
Exactly.
Interesting.
So then we get into some stories about dating. This bartender was talking about how he sees women come in and they flirt with guys just to get free drinks.
Oh, the classic free drinks scheme.
Right. And he said there was this one woman who, like, he didn't give her a free drink, and she was like, are you gay?
Wow, that's aggressive.
Yeah, like just straight up.
Putting it all out there.
And then there were a lot of comments about women who go on, like, multiple dinner dates a week just to get free meals.
Oh, the dinner date hustle?
Yeah, is that a common thing? I don't know.
I've heard of it, but who knows how widespread it actually is.
Right, right.
It's hard to tell from anecdotes alone.
Yeah, but there were a lot of stories about it.
Interesting.
Okay, so one guy was talking about this woman he went on a date with, and she was in an open relationship.
Okay. Open relationships, those can be tricky.
Yeah, and he's saying that, like, she didn't offer to pay for anything. And then later he saw that she had this book on her nightstand about, like,
Female manipulation?
yeah, basically, like, how to get what you want from men.
Oh, so he's seeing some red flags there.
Yeah, major red flags. And then another story popped up about a woman who broke up with this guy right after he did all these repairs on her house.
Oh, so she got the free labor and then bounced?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's cold.
And then there was one about this woman who convinced her husband to support her while she didn't work, and then she divorced him and got a huge settlement.
Oof. Yeah, that's a tough one to swallow.
Yeah, and so a lot of the men in this thread were saying that they feel this pressure to financially support their partners.
Yeah, even if they can't really afford it.
Right, and it's causing them a lot of stress and resentment.
Right, because it puts them in a really difficult position.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to, like, societal expectations. Men are supposed to be the providers.
Right, and that can create a lot of pressure and even a sense of obligation.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's definitely a complex issue with a lot of different layers.
Yeah, and we're just scratching the surface here.
Right, this is just a glimpse into the conversation.
Exactly.
There's so much more to unpack.
Definitely. And it's interesting because even though a lot of these stories were, focused on women, there were also a lot of comments saying, hey, like, men do this too.
Yeah, it's not like women have a monopoly on financial manipulation.
Right. Some people were saying, like, men can be just as bad, if not worse.
Exactly. It's important to acknowledge that both genders are capable of this kind of behavior.
Yeah, it's not a one-sided issue.
Absolutely. It's a human problem, not a gender problem.
Right. And I think it's good that they brought that up because it's easy to get caught up in the, man versus woman thing.
Right. It's easy to fall into those gender stereotypes.
But at the end of the day, it's about individuals and their choices.
Exactly. And I think this thread really highlighted that sense of vulnerability that a lot of men feel in relationships.
Yeah, they're opening up and sharing their experiences of being taken advantage of.
And it's important to validate those experiences.
Right, just because we're saying it can go both ways doesn't mean that men's experiences are any less valid.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that everyone has the potential to be hurt or taken advantage of.
Right, and I think that's something that we need to be more aware of.
Definitely.
So there was also some talk about this concept of hypergamy.
Oh, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms.
Right, so for those who don't know, hypergamy is basically the idea that people are attracted to partners who have more resources or status.
Yeah, like marrying up.
Right, and there was a big debate about whether this, like a natural thing or if it's societal.
Right. Is it nature versus nurture?
Exactly. Some people were saying it's just human nature to want a partner who can provide security and stability.
Right, like it's evolutionary.
Yeah. But then others were saying that it's more about societal expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Men are supposed to be the breadwinners and women are supposed to be attracted to that.
Right, like it's ingrained in our culture.
Yeah, it's a really interesting discussion, and I don't think there's a clear answer.
Yeah, it's probably a combination of both.
Right, like our biology and our culture probably both play a role.
Definitely. And it's something to keep in mind when we're talking about financial dynamics in relationships.
Yeah, because it could be that some of these behaviors are driven by those deeper motivations.
Right, like a desire for security or status.
Exactly.
So it's important to be aware of those factors.
Yeah, and I think this whole conversation is really just highlighting how complex relationships are.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much more to it than meets the eye.
Right, and we're just scratching the surface here with this Reddit thread.
Yeah, this is just a small glimpse into the bigger picture.
But it's a good starting point for a deeper conversation.
Absolutely.
So now I want to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk about the broader implications of all of this.
Okay, so moving beyond the anecdotes and looking at the bigger picture.
Right, because even though this was just one Reddit thread, I think it reflects some larger trends that are happening in society.
Yeah, like the fact that there are more female breadwinners now than ever before.
Right, and that's definitely changing the dynamics of relationships.
Absolutely, because now you have more women who are financially independent and don't necessarily need a man to support them.
Right, and so that's going to affect things like alimony and expectations around who pays for what.
Definitely, it's shifting the balance of power in a lot of ways.
And I think this Reddit thread is a reflection of that shift.
Yeah, it's showing us how people are grappling with these changing roles and expectations.
And it's not always pretty.
No, it can be messy and complicated.
But it's important to have these conversations.
Absolutely, because the more we talk about it, the better equipped we'll be to navigate these challenges.
Exactly.
So even though this Reddit thread focused on a very specific question, I think it has a lot of relevance for all of us.
Yeah, because whether we're men or women single or in a relationship, we all have to deal with money.
Right, it's a universal language.
And this thread just shows how money can complicate our relationships.
Absolutely. And it highlights the need for clear communication and boundaries.
Yes, 1,000%. Yeah, it's amazing how, one little question on Reddit can spark such a huge conversation.
Right, it really gets people thinking and sharing their experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so great about these online forums. It gives people a space to talk about these things that maybe they wouldn't feel comfortable talking about in real life.
Definitely. It can be a really cathartic experience to share your story and connect with others who have been through similar things.
Yeah, and even if you haven't personally experienced something, you can still learn a lot from reading other people's perspectives.
Right. It helps you broaden your understanding of the world and see things from different angles.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, is there any final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
After reading all these stories, I think the biggest takeaway for me is the importance of communication.
Yeah, especially when it comes to money.
Oh, absolutely, because money can be such a touchy subject.
Right. It's easy to avoid those conversations, but as we've seen, it can really come back to bite you.
Exactly. And I think a lot of these problems could be avoided if people were just more upfront about their expectations and their financial situation.
Yeah, and it's not just about being honest with your partner. It's also about being honest with yourself.
Right. Like knowing your own financial values and goals and being able to communicate those clearly.
And if you're struggling with any of this stuff, don't be afraid to seek out help.
Yeah, there are resources available like financial advisors or therapists who can help you navigate these challenges.
And if you're enjoying these deep dives, be sure to subscribe to Voices of the Soul.
And for more visual content, check out the Shauna Pelage YouTube channel.
We're always exploring new and interesting topics, so hit that subscribe button to stay up to date.
And don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think.
We love hearing from you guys.
Absolutely, your feedback is invaluable.
So until next time, keep those minds curious and those conversations flowing.
And remember, communication is key.
Couldn't have said it better myself.